Get cool stuff for what you were going to do anyway. Drink beer. With Buy Beer, Get Gear from Labatt, you can just snap a photo of your receipt and upload it to the website to rack up points for exclusive merch. Get points for every purchase, whether you're grabbing a pint on draft, a case for a party, or a tall boy at the stadium. Any size, any product, anywhere you buy Labatt. Buy beer, get gear. Sign up now at rewards.labattusa.com.
This is entertainment. People pay to watch this.
Pass to a cutting Hiltz. He darts in. Oh!
People actually subscribe.
All across Central New York.
Time expired! Syracuse has done it!
It's Drive Time with your host, Tim Leonard.
Hey, guess what? I'm getting one.
We welcome you into Drive Time on a Friday afternoon in Central New York. Happy weekend, everyone leaving work right now. Happy hour. Happy NCAA playoffs opening weekend. Cuse Women's Lacrosse in action tonight. Round one game from Annapolis. Taking on Loyola, Maryland down in Annapolis. Winner of that game will play Sunday at 1 p.m. Women's Lax game tonight at 7 p.m. for the Cuse. Number 9 ranked team in the country going into the NCAA playoffs. If they win, likely will draw Navy in the second round. Navy is the hosting team as the 6th seed in that pod of the women's bracket. Then you've got Cuse men's lacrosse on Sunday against Yale. Another year of being a 6th seed, another year of playing an Ivy League team in the opening round, and we'll see if it's half as good of a game or as thrilling of a game as last year in the first round when the Orange started their chase back to championship weekend. Somehow came from, 6 or 7 down at one point to Harvard in that Mother's Day miracle last year. It will be another Mother's Day 5 p.m. start as Syracuse takes on Yale inside the Dome on Sunday. Anish Shroff and Quint Kesnick will be on the call for that game, and Quint Kesnick will join us to preview Syracuse and Yale some more in about 15 minutes from now. Right around 5:15, we'll bring on Q and talk about the NCAA playoffs opening weekend. He's also going to be on the call for Cornell and Johns Hopkins. Which one are we rooting for in that matchup? I guess Cornell. Although, I don't know. Cornell might be a tough draw if Syracuse makes it to the Final Four and they have to play the Big Red. Would be kind of fitting in the year that they didn't play Cornell that Syracuse would match up with Cornell in the Final Four, but probably getting ahead of ourselves there. Certainly it's going to be a lot of jam-packed and close games, action-packed games this weekend that will be fun to watch. And Syracuse and Yale seems to be a close game on paper, and we'll continue to preview that matchup this afternoon on Drive Time. We can work in your thoughts on the phone lines as we roll along this afternoon as well at 315-437-7644. That's 4ESPN44. You can get on in the Q Sports Talk chat as well. We'll be taking your comments there. Q Sports Talk on the YouTube page as we talk all things Syracuse sports, 5 to 6 p.m. on Drive Time. We begin today with our Burdick BMW of Cicero and Burdick Toyota opening drive, where I'd like to go through the 6 players that we know are coming into Syracuse from the transfer portal class. 6 college players that have switched from one college team to Syracuse in the transfer portal class this offseason, and break down one good stat and one bad stat for all 6 players. One positive, one negative, one concerning stat, and one encouraging stat from all 6 transfer portal additions to this point for Syracuse. I tend to think there will probably be 1 or 2 more roster spots added by the time this is all said and done. Maybe that is a high school player. Maybe it's an international player. Maybe it's a transfer portal player. We'll see. Syracuse has added 9 players to their roster already, and they have retained 2 players in Kyan Anthony and Sadiq White. Right now, the Orange's transfer portal class for men's basketball ranks 14th in the country, according to On3. They were 15th in the nation last year. ranks 38th in the country according to 24/7 Sports, so it just depends on where you're looking here. 14th on On3, 38th on 24/7 Sports. Last year on 247 Sports, they were 35th in the country, so slightly worse on 24/7 and slightly better on On3 when you compare Syracuse's transfer portal class in 2025 to 2026, year one under Jerry McNamara. So the 6 players they have added, all mid-major players, which has gotten the ire of some of the fan base. You've got 3 players from Siena, the wing Gavin Doty, who averaged 18 points per game last year at Siena and is a local product. You've got the big man Francis Folafak and another big man in Tasman Goodrick, who might be the most underrated player really on the roster overall right now. Then you've got at the point guard position from McNeese State, Garway Dual, a center from Appalachian State in Luke Wilson, and a Temple transfer wing in Aiden Tobiasen, who this weekend is participating in the NBA G League Combine. Now, his plans seem pretty clear all along that he is testing the waters with the intention to return. And we can get into that. If anyone is worried about that, I wouldn't be, although Aiden Tobiasen is popping up on some mock drafts. And when I say some mock drafts, I saw CBS Sports today. Kevin O'Connor released a 2-round mock draft, and he had Aiden Tobiasen in sort of the middle to back half of the second round. I think it was round 2, pick 17 is where he tabbed Aiden Tobiasen. So for everyone worried about the overall talent of the class, the ranking's pretty similar from last year, and Aiden Tobiasen is right now pegged as a potential NBA guy or a guy that could get drafted should he stay in the draft, which we do not anticipate him to stay in the NBA draft. I would not be worried about that. I think all along Syracuse knew he was going to get some feedback and then he was going to go play for Syracuse this year. So maybe it's in our nature to always have our guard up a little bit when it comes to that. But anyway, let's get into the stats on these guys. Gavin Doty, a good stat on him. 97th percentile last year in turnover rate. Truly one of the best lead guards in the country last year at taking care of the basketball. Bad stat for Gavin Doty. We're going one good stat, one bad stat for all of these transfer portal guys. 59% field goal percentage at the rim last year. The D1 average, 62%. So we've talked about this. You wonder, will his game translate going up a conference? But he also has looked very good against the tougher teams on the schedule the last couple years for Siena. For Aiden Tobiasen, who we were just discussing, the Temple transfer that is getting some NBA love right now. One good stat, 83rd percentile finisher at the rim. So unlike Gavin Doty, where I'm saying it's a little concerning that he's slightly below average at scoring around the rim, Tobiasen very good at finishing around the rim, has a little bit more athleticism, can dunk it with both hands, just a solid finisher around the rim. One bad stat, he only shot at 29% from 3 in conference play last year. His three-point numbers overall, 34% last year. He profiles certainly as an NBA guy and probably like a 3-and-D wing at the next level. Obviously, I think there's a lot for him to prove to get to first-round territory next year. And he's probably thinking, if I come back and I go to Syracuse and I have a nice year, I could be a first-round pick after my junior season, which is saying something because he's a total late bloomer. So to even be in the NBA conversation is very exciting, I'm sure, for Aiden Tobiasen. But just think about that. I mean, how many guys in recent Syracuse memory have we confidently been able to say that's an NBA talent? And while this roster, some are considering it less talented, here's a guy, Aiden Tobiasen, on the roster right now who is on NBA mock drafts currently. Judah Mintz was definitely in that category. Donnie Freeman saw his name pop up on mock drafts in his freshman season. There are a couple other examples, but for Syracuse to have an NBA talent or someone that could get drafted in the NBA speaks to they might be fine when we consider do they have a top-tier guy this year? Francis Folafak, his best stat, I would say, 93rd percentile in assist rate. He was top 20 in the MAC last year in assist rate as a freshman big, which is very rare to see. Bad stat, he wasn't very efficient overall offensively, just 21st percentile in offensive rating, according to CBB Analytics. Garway Dual, one good stat. How about 99th percentile in block plus steal rate? He's amazing at creating turnovers. One bad stat, he's a 29% career three-point shooter. His last power conference season at Seton Hall, when he was a sophomore, 15th percentile offensive player. He's very clearly a defensive-minded player, as it stands right now, his profile. Center Luke Wilson from Appalachian State, one good stat, 90th percentile block rate. One bad stat, only attempted 14 field goal attempts that were not at the rim last year. 197 free throw attempts compared to 161 field goal attempts. He got to the free throw line a lot, but it's a little concerning that maybe he was too reliant on getting to the free throw line, and will that be sustainable as he levels up to the ACC? And then Tasman Goodrick, again, I've said, I think he is one of the more underrated guys on this roster for Syracuse. You look at his stats, there's not a lot of bad stats for him. He is 98th percentile in offensive rebound rate, so that's probably his best stat. And then a bad stat, I guess, is the fact that he only played 9 games last year. But across the board, he is really pretty efficient at everything, and we're probably sleeping on him just because he played the 9 games last year, and there's a bit of a question mark with his injury history. He's only played 18 games at the Division I level in his career. He was a bench warmer for Cal Baptist as a freshman, and 9 games last year starting for Siena before the knee injury. That's one good stat, one bad stat for all these transfer portal guys. We'll talk some lacrosse on the other side. Quint Kesnick will join us. We'll be on the call for Syracuse and Yale on Sunday night. Stay with us. You're listening to Drive Time. What's up, chat? How are we all doing on this Friday? Gaper's in the chat calling me by his favorite nickname. Last year's game was a heart attack, Craig. That's the craziest game I've ever been a part of. Any sporting event. In person, I'd say. I still can't believe they came back from that. And not only did they come back, but they got ahead with 3 minutes left. It was like, how are they even remotely in the game to, oh my God, they're winning and they're going to, how did they not win this game in regulation? Nice bowling ball. That's lovely. Hey, Jen. Who's going to the Lax game Sunday? Anyone in here? A little surprised Syracuse is 3.5 point favorites or 3.5 goal favorites against Yale. Thought they'd be, I think I guessed earlier on the show this week, like 1.5 or 2.5. Maybe that's changed, but that's what I saw. That's good. Feeling better, San Diego Cuse. Sorry to hear that. That's always tough. Sabres game tonight. That's right. We got Knicks, Sabres. Yankees Spencer Jones debut tonight. Maybe you're not a Knicks or Yankees fan, but Sabres game tonight will be exciting. I'm going to have mixed feelings if the Sabres meet my Canes in the next round. Canes certainly look like they're getting there. They've won First 7 games of the playoffs. Yeah, good to hear. That would be the most Syracuse thing ever if Aiden Tobiasen went pro, but I doubt that happens. Don't think we should be worried about that. Yeah, that penalty was huge. I think they're ESPN Plus tonight, right, Craig? The women's game? That's what I saw, at least. It's not linear. That penalty was huge. That Chuck Kaczynski goal, Craig, was the loudest I've ever seen the Dome for lacrosse when that went in. That was incredible. That was his first career goal. He's had a couple nice goals this year, but pretty wild first career goal. What's up, Kev? Food truck battle. Should I know about this? Is this an event this weekend? What's the parlay, Ryan?
Radio 97.7, 100.1, 1200 AM and 1440 AM. ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. Watch live on QSportsTalk.com.
Rolling along on drive time on a Friday afternoon ahead of the first round of the NCAA playoffs. Syracuse lacrosse hosting on Sunday night, which is always good to see. Third straight year the Orange men's lacrosse team has been hosting. They're actually the only school on the men's lacrosse side of things to be hosting in each of the last 3 years. And inside the Dome on Sunday at 5 p.m. when the Orange play Yale will be Quint Kesnick on the call with Anish Shroff, a Syracuse grad Anish Shroff, and they will also be calling Cornell and Johns Hopkins in Ithaca. So Quint has just touched down in lovely central New York in spring, and he joins us right now on Drive Time. Quint, we appreciate you making some time for us here. And we've been saying all year long that this is a wide open tournament, and it's hard to make sense of who are truly the top contenders or the top national championship favorites. What do you make of the draw that Syracuse got here, knowing that it is kind of a wide open tournament this year?
I've always looked at it. And by the way, it's sunny out today in Syracuse.
Imagine that.
Yeah, I've always looked at it as a one-game tournament because you don't know what's going to happen in the next round. So all you have is Yale at home. And I think if you're a Syracuse fan, you're hoping that the Orange continue to perform at a different level when they're at home this season. They're 7-0 at home. Their goals are noticeably, they score more goals at home by quite a significant margin. And opponents have really struggled. I go back to that Georgetown game. Maryland played okay. That was kind of a closer win. But Syracuse has really been dominant in the Dome. And so I think playing a young Yale team, you hope that environment can be a goal or two to make a difference if you're a Syracuse fan. But I saw Yale last week in the Ivy League tournament. I was impressed with their team speed, and I was impressed at how much that defense has improved over the last 2 years.
Yeah, obviously a very young Yale team, but would you say Andy Shea should be in consideration for Coach of the Year, Quint, with the job that he's done? I mean, they had won 6 games in a row before that Ivy League championship or semifinal game you're referring to.
Yes, he definitely would be in my top 2 or 3 in terms of the job he has done with this young team. They had a lousy season last year. They were young this year. They got off to that 3-4 start. They beat Cornell and then went on a 6-game win streak. They've tightened up their defense dramatically. They've got a nice goaltender in Ben Friedman. He's making about 13 saves per game. His save percentage has been around 60% during that win streak. They rely on him quite a bit. But their schemes and their concepts are much more organized this year. A couple of years ago, they were kind of all over the place in terms of their slide packages, in terms of their positioning. So I just think that unit in particular is improved. And then the offense being super young. Connor Gately is a dangerous player behind the net. My guess is Riley Figueres will cover him. And then Yale's got some speed at the midfield, guys who can really accelerate. The first unit is much better than their second unit. I don't think their second midfield is really scaring anybody, but they've been capable, and their wins in the Ivy League stood up, and that's why they're here.
You mentioned Connor Gately, their sophomore ex-attacker, and watching the film of that Yale-Princeton game we're talking about in the semis last week in Ithaca, they scored a ton of goals coming from back X, ton of wraparound goals where Gately was able to get topside. And I think Jimmy McCool has been solid all year for Syracuse, but it does feel like the Orange have been burned a good bit on those type of goals, wraparound goals from back X, and Jimmy playing those type of shots. Is that something you're looking at closely in this matchup, or what do you think is going to be the big things for Yale to focus on against the Syracuse defense?
That's a fair criticism of McCool, who early in the season was really playing, I thought, at a high level, and then as the ACC schedule has done to a lot of goalies across the league this year. That's a hard league on goalies. I mean, Carolina's goalie got yanked. Virginia, Jake Merrick was up and then down and then back up again. Duke's goaltender got yanked in the Dome. The ACC was brutal on goalies this year, so I give McCool a pass for those games. I caught his Johns Hopkins game where he was spectacular, and Hopkins took a ton of shots, but they're all from the wing. They're all severe angle shots, and Jimmy is a large dude. And if you're trying to beat him from a wing, you got problems. So I think it's important that Yale, while they may initiate their offense behind the net, and that's kind of where they've been successful with Gately back there. I think it's important that they do work to get the ball in the middle of the field, because if you're taking severe angle shots, McCool's pretty good in that department. I think the bigger issue for Syracuse defense, though, is their pick defense.
Yeah.
They've really struggled with some two-man pick games, especially in recent weeks. Their communication has been inconsistent. Their schematics defensively and guarding picks have been inconsistent, and it's led to some pretty easy goals by opponents. So if I were Yale, I'd take a page out of what you saw in a couple of those ACC games and hit them with a heavy dose of two-man games.
Knowing that this is such a wide-open tournament, Quint, how much do you think it's going to come down to goalie play, face-off play? I mean, we talk about that every May, it feels like, but knowing that Team 1, who is the number one overall seed, is Princeton compared to Team 10, I mean, you could make a case Duke could win this thing, Army could win this thing. Is it going to come down, in your eyes, a lot to goalie play and face-off play this tournament?
Those are two categories that I've always, charted and make that easy, instant comparison when there's a matchup. But I think you got to go deeper maybe than that this season in terms of personnel matchups on different sides of the ball, whether it be an attack that can pose a matchup because of their speed or their size against a defense that may not have the answers to that, you know what I mean? Or a midfield line that is super powerful and somebody's short stick defensive midfielders aren't that good. So is there a matchup somewhere in this game that catches your eye right away as saying maybe this could be one-sided? There's a big potential here for one team, and we don't know. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. What we see on paper doesn't always correlate to what you see in person. So, there's a couple interesting matchups this week when Penn State's playing Army. I mean, Army's goalie Sean Byrne is about as experienced as it gets. He sits at 60% this season. Penn State's goalie Preston Hawkins is a freshman, and he's early in the year he's really struggling. So that's a contrast that's got my attention. There's also a couple injuries hovering around some of these teams, whether it be Johns Hopkins with Quentin Kilrain, their star defender, Owen Duffy at North Carolina and his hamstring, and then Hunter Aquino at Penn State and his health. So these are things that you also should be monitoring if you're looking at these games.
Yeah, you mentioned the injury to Owen Duffy, who did not finish the ACC championship game last week. They start with UAlbany. If UNC were to win and if Syracuse were to win, we would see round 3 of Carolina and Cuse. The Tewaaraton finalists came out this week, and the same way we've been talking about how it's a wide open year from a team perspective, very challenging year to pick just 5 guys that could be in competition for the Heisman of College Lacrosse, the Tewaaraton Award. Owen Duffy did make that list. Joey Smolina's on the list. Nate Kabiri at Princeton. You've got a defender in Sean Light. Defenders never won the award, but obviously Sean Light considered the top defender in the sport. And then Willem Firth down the road at Cornell are the 5 finalists. Did you think that's about as good as they could have done this year in a tough year to rank finalists, or do you have any qualms with the list overall?
I don't like their system. I don't like the process. The Heisman Trophy doesn't narrow itself down to 5 candidates before the bowl season.
Yeah.
I just, the Hodge Trophy in wrestling doesn't. It's open to everybody. And there's 4 more games to be played. And the 4 games that are going to be played, in my eyes, are the 4 biggest games of the year. So to limit that, to have someone like Brendan Millen not on the list, or to put Duffy on the list knowing that he's got one hamstring that might be blown out and we don't know what his status is, it just all seems like they obviously they do it to get attention, to get people talking about it like we are right now. I just don't think it's functional. I just wish they left it alone and every player had a chance to kind of go on a run, because somebody's going to get hot here in the next 4 games, and somebody's team's going to have success, and some individuals are going to have success, and they're just hoping that person's on that list. It could be Josh Yago of Notre Dame. It could be Matt Collison of Johns Hopkins. It could be Ryan Goldstein of Cornell.
Right.
It could be Michael Leo of Syracuse. And again, is their body of work sufficient to win the Tewaaraton? I don't know, but I'm not a fan of their process. I think there's no reason really to limit it to 5 with 4 games to go.
Yeah, I think especially this year they could get in trouble with the way that they did it, and everyone was pointing out the Millen brothers not being on the list. It will be fascinating to see how Virginia does, knowing that Charlottesville is the host site this year for the Final Four. If you had to pick right now, Quint, who are the top 2 or 3 teams you would put in your bracket advancing, and if you had to make a prediction for, say, championship game or top 2 or 3 national championship teams, what comes to mind?
Well, in terms of this weekend, I think there's a severe advantage of being the number 1 or number 2 seed. To have to play that play-in winner, and we watch those games on Wednesday night. That's a quick turnaround involving travel. And you've got 2 good teams in Notre Dame and Princeton. I think that should hold serve. I would say Syracuse is a solid favorite at home because of Yale's inexperience. And then I think Carolina is a solid favorite over Albany. Albany has a history of playing well in the tournament. Just this year, every time they've stepped up in competition, they've fallen flat on their face. And the one thing I do, Syracuse fans do understand that playing late, they're the 5 o'clock game this year, not the 7:30 game, but they've got a history of getting upset late on Sunday night. So I think they're aware of that. And then the other games, quite honestly, in the first round, I could see going either way. They're toss-up type games. And I think people are maybe discrediting Richmond a little more than they should. They're 14-1. I love everything about that team, and they're slight favorites over Duke. It wouldn't surprise me if they handle that game. Virginia Georgetown, in my mind, could go either way. I think Cornell is a solid favorite. I think Syracuse is a solid favorite. I think Penn State Army is a great game. It's going to be close. But I've been wrong before. But this year is not the type of year you want to be.
Right.
You want to be making wild predictions.
Yeah, it's just looking at the opening round, it feels like a lot of these games are quarterfinal matchups more than round 1 matchups.
Right, you go to Vegas because they have the best computers, right? And you look at their lines, and like for most of the season, Notre Dame's been the choice, and Princeton was second choice by a little bit, and then there was like 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th choices all grouped together, and it's kind of that way right now. Princeton is now the favorite in Las Vegas. And Notre Dame's the second choice, but the 3rd, 4th, and 5th choices have crept a little closer. And then you got your long shots, your team like Albany or Army and the like. So there's still a pack of 6 or 7 teams, the seeds basically, who, and I kind of trust Vegas to get it right analytically. You know what I mean, with their computers. Yeah. I don't always agree with them, but they're taking all the data possible and they're crunching those numbers better than I can. So I tend to look at them as a stencil, as saying, okay, this is a realistic projection of the way these teams would match up if they continue to play at the level they're playing at. That's the one thing we look for. Who can get hot, who can improve their level in the month of May.
Yeah, for whatever it's worth, Vegas does have Syracuse as 3.5 goal favorites against Yale, which I would have probably guessed to be a little tighter of a spread, but that tells you something there. The Vegas numbers like the Orange at home, and they have been undefeated so far at home this year. Couple more for you, Quint. I know the Syracuse fan base in particular is always hard on the Cuse in two areas, clearing and turnovers. And really, statistically, they rank pretty well in the turnover category. They're clearing kind of middle of the pack. And the thing that I always like to bring up this year in particular is they have played 10 of their 16 games. They've seen a 10-man ride, which is kind of ridiculous. We've talked with Gary Gate about getting Jimmy McCool to have quicker outlet passes, kind of get up and out, have quicker clears. How do you evaluate Syracuse in those two areas, clearing and turnovers, knowing that the fan base is a little down on them, but I do feel like Syracuse has a bigger microscope on them in those two areas because of the fan base that is here in Central New York?
I'm okay with their clearing numbers. I do think that McCool and that defense, when they're humming at home, they're running from defense to offense, and Dwan is involved in the rush. And when Jimmy can make clean saves, that can lead to some good runouts. Their short stick defensive midfielders probably don't do enough in terms of carrying the ball up the field and generating some offense. I mean, a guy like Tyler McCarthy should be crushing it in that department. He's a former offensive midfielder as recently as February, and now he's playing more shifts on D. He should be taking advantage of that matchup. So I think he can run there. The turnovers, yes. I think turnovers at crucial times this season have crept up and cost Syracuse in some of those close games. Again, when you're playing elite competition, those possessions with a minute to go in a quarter or 5 minutes to go in the game count severely. And too often Syracuse has turned the ball over in that regard. And the other thing, I think it's probably bigger than those two categories, look at the penalties. Yeah. What do they have, like 16 penalties in 16 games? Their last loss directly attributed to a penalty. So I think the penalty department I would lump in with those two other categories that you mentioned, especially in the playoffs, especially now that you're going to be playing really good teams with good extra man units, and power plays can tend to shift momentum in a game. In the tournament, referees generally call fewer penalties. They let you play a little more, but those extra man goals. And trust me, I lost the national championship game to Syracuse by virtue of two fourth-quarter extra man goals. Yeah, well, by Rodney Dumpson.
Right.
That's the difference. That's the difference in that game. They win by one. They scored two of their fourth-quarter goals were on the power play. We got tired and we fouled.
Well, we were just talking about last year's game, and what swung that game, the first-round game, was Harvard had that unreleasable penalty, and Syracuse scored a ton of goals on the man up.
And Gary brought that up. I know Gary brought that up with us in our discussions with him this week, and I'm sure he brought it up locally as well in his media. But that was, those penalties can really swing. The non-releasables especially. You got a face-off guy, and there's a non-releasable penalty. That's a scary situation.
Yeah, Yale also has the number one man-up team in the country entering the tournament.
Correct.
So.
That's the other thing. So if Cuse, and I expect him to stay out of the penalty box, but there's been a couple times this year where they've gotten a little exuberant on some of these scrums where guys are coming in high and late. And you just don't want to take a stupid penalty in a playoff game, especially when the spread between the two teams, the margin in the game is 1, 2, 3 goals. Like that you're just asking for trouble.
No doubt. All right, Quint. Well, we appreciate the time. Enjoy the game tomorrow in Ithaca, and enjoy the game on Sunday, Syracuse and Yale.
I'm excited. Remember, last thing, Orange fans, they lead the country in attendance, and that's a special place. And I'm encouraging the fans to get out there on Sunday afternoon after graduation and support this team, because you can make a difference if you're an Orange fan and you get loud in that place.
Absolutely. Well said. It's the last chance to see this senior class as well inside the Dome, this important senior class, as they go into one final postseason run. So that's Quint Kesnick, the ESPN lacrosse analyst. He will be on with Anish Shroff Sunday, 5 p.m. start on ESPNU as Syracuse takes on Yale. And, of course, you can listen to the radio broadcast. Me and Kyle will have you covered starting at 4:30 on TK99 and the Syracuse Sports Network from Learfield. We will step aside, and I will do the very challenging task of trying to predict the lacrosse bracket and all of the games this year, knowing that it is such a wide open year. We'll dive into some of the matchups, what my prediction of the Final Four is, what my prediction of the championship game is, and where Syracuse fits into all of that. We will do that as we return on Drive Time. You're listening to it on ESPN Radio and watching on QSportsTalk.com.
Evan Canty and Michelle.
Yeah, Kier Soiree package deal. Amazing. They can't escape each other. Not really amazing. I think we all saw that coming. Although he was in Memphis yesterday, it looked like. Should give it a shot this weekend, San Diego Q's. Cue up the game. Sure, it'll be a close, exciting game. I don't even remember that. He took a corner three this year. Soiree literally hadn't made a field goal like the first, 12 or 15 games of the year. That was one stat I kept referencing. Is he ever going to make a layup? Or he hadn't even attempted a field goal, right? Wasn't that the stat? Game Sunday, 5 p.m. Air ball in front of the bench. I think I do kind of remember this now. Of all the jump shots to attempt. See if I can look up a Kier Soiree shot chart while we're in the break. Oh, that's right. They're not going to know him as a Kier. Shot charts. Yeah, they've got his 1-3. It wasn't in the corner, according to this. It's more like on the wing. 0 for 1 from 3. Right wing 3. I guess, yeah, in front of the bench. That would make sense, Gavendo, where this is. 72% field goal percentage at the rim. He was 5 for 7. Really struggled in the 7 to 9 foot range. He was 1 for 3. Just a wild shot chart. See if I can turn it around. You guys probably won't even be able to see, but there's like 5 dots and then the 1-3 dot out there. Yeah, I'll be pulling for John Galloway in that game. Craig, appreciate you listening. Yeah, I'm excited to watch the Lax games tomorrow and Sunday. The shot chart says it was a wing 3, but maybe they're off. We got to find the video evidence of it. What's up, B-Bixby? Bixby. This wasn't ESPN. It's CBB Analytics, one of my favorite sites. Yeah, I think it's off. It's got it like right on the wing. I seem to remember corner too. Welcome back into Drive Time. Well, Friday afternoon drive time where the vibes are high as we go into NCAA playoff weekend. Don't forget women's lacrosse team tonight in action, 7 p.m. start, Loyola, Maryland. That will be on ESPN Plus, not a linear game in the first round. They win that game, they'll advance to play likely Navy. Navy plays UMass in Annapolis. Navy, the hosting team, as the 6th seed, will likely be awaiting the winner of Syracuse-Loyola. The Orange did beat Loyola in the regular season, 15-7, so we'll see what they have tonight in a rematch. It was actually Reggie Thorpe's first win of his tenure at Syracuse after they played the top 3 teams in the country in the first 3 games. Game 4, they won 15-7. Loyola pulled their goalie in that game, and now it'll be a 7 p.m. start tonight in Annapolis for round 1. Let's go to the phone lines right now as we welcome you back in on Drive Time. If you have a thought, you can give us a ring at 315-437-7644. And let's go to Jay in Baldwinsville. Hey, Jay.
Hey, what's going on, Tim? Just out walking the dog again on a Friday night here. Weather finally cleared out. So, again, I listened to, your conversation with Quint, and then I also listened on YouTube to the Gary Gate had a little media availability, had a little 9-minute presser going on. You know, the only thing that I'm concerned with, Tim, and I think you would agree with me, this is kind of Syracuse is definitely a senior or upperclassman-led squad, and the one concerning thing that's been a theme is, after every, when I listen to Gate and his pressers is like, we've got to clean up. We've got to clean up the mistakes. We've got to, also our mentality's got a little better. We got to be a little better. And that concerns me a little bit. You would hope these things had already been kind of cleaned up as we head down the stretch here. So, that's one thing that's going to concern me going forward. The other thing, we talk about Mullen at the face, but, people tend to forget that they kind of put it all on Mullen. But, the face-off team, they're exactly that. They're a team. And, I haven't seen Mullen get beat cleanly very often, right? It's more our wing play. I mean, we've got to get a little bit better wing play with our short stick midi at the midfield during face and with our long pole. We've got to come up with those 50-50 balls, I feel, a little bit more. So those are a couple of concerns. I think Mullen does a great job, tying it up, but it seems like we're losing those 50-50 balls. I love seeing the back, getting back to the offense. I love seeing the back, behind the back scores and passes and stuff like that. But I'd like to see us, our offense be a little bit more disciplined as we go into, against Yale. We're going to, it'll be thrilling. We should win this game. But as we start moving on, we can't have the mistakes that we've been having. I didn't know what your thoughts were on that, but I was just curious about that.
Yeah, it's all good points, Jay, and I appreciate you checking in. I think that, honestly, the mistakes happen more with just basic passing than them getting too fancy, it feels like, or trying to go behind the back at times when they don't need to go behind the back. So, I mean, certainly there have been some mental mistakes, and it is concerning to some extent that Gary Gate, it feels like he's a broken record. He's kind of saying the same stuff over the course of the year, and this is a senior-led team. So I hear you there, but I do think that for the most part, Syracuse has played well in the last 2 weeks. They've limited mistakes. The mistakes have just popped up at bad times, and they've come in the fourth quarter. And, well, your point is definitely well taken on the wing play. It's it's just going to come down to, will they get ground balls throughout the game? Will they get 50-50 balls throughout the game on top of the face-off wing play too? So those are the little things in a game that we expect to be close. I think Yale is a physical team. I think they're going to come in hungry. They don't really have much to lose here. They're ahead of the curve as a young team playing in the Dome. I think it will be interesting to see who wins the little things tomorrow. And honestly, if Syracuse wins the little things in all of these games, you feel pretty good about their chances of making it to the Final Four and maybe making a run at a national championship, because they are talented. They have that top-end talent. They just sometimes shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to what we've seen in terms of execution in the fourth quarter. There's Jay in Baldwinsville. I think his dog was getting ready to go for a run or something at the end of that walk. We heard his dog for a little bit there. But always appreciate Jay checking in when he is on a walk, and it's a nice night to walk the dog here in central New York, and will be interesting to see how that Syracuse-Yale matchup transpires inside the Dome on Sunday. Let's pick the NCAA lacrosse bracket right now, or take my best stab at it. Quint was saying this is a really hard year to make predictions, and I'm with him on that. We'll go through all the first-round games, and I'll make my prediction here, and then we'll see who I end up with. I've not even filled out a bracket yet. I'm going to do this live and see who I end up with in the championship game and winning it all. Obviously, Princeton over Marist as the number 1 overall seed. Quint mentioned a key injury to Penn State in the 8-9 matchup. It's 8 versus unseeded. Penn State is hosting Army. That game will take place tomorrow. Key injury is Hunter Quino for Penn State, who maybe would be a Tewaaraton finalist if he had been healthy throughout this year, but he's missed 5 games. He was pulled due to injury in the Big Ten championship game. So his status a little bit uncertain. I'm going to take Penn State to win that game. And then actually, I think I'm going to take Penn State in a upset over Princeton in the quarterfinals. I think Princeton is really good, but Penn State matched up well against them in the season opener, and Penn State made it to the Final Four last year. I think we're sleeping on them a little bit, so I'll take Penn State to make it out of that section of the bracket as an 8 seed back to the Final Four for the second straight year. And, of course, I'm kind of going out on a ledge there to some extent due to the injury concern to one of their top attackers. Richmond, the 4 seed, playing Duke, who's unseeded. This is probably the most likely upset pick of the first round. A lot of people on Duke. They were obviously controversial to get in the field to begin with. I'll lean Richmond here just because I do think we're sleeping on the Spiders, and they played very well in the NCAA tournament last year. Really played Cornell as tough as anyone in that quarterfinal game that was before Syracuse out at Hempstead. So I'll take Richmond to advance past Duke. Virginia, Georgetown. Steve asked me on Orange Nation, what's my one upset? I said Georgetown, so I'll stick by that one. Just because Georgetown has been as good as anyone at winning in the first round under Kevin Warren, and I do think Virginia riding high, but shorter turnaround for them after having to play Sunday in the ACC Championship. Virginia's been very Jekyll and Hyde all year. They're certainly rolling right now, but it's hard for me to bank on them actually winning the national championship based on their inconsistency at times this year. So I'll go Georgetown in an upset there. I'll say Richmond advances past Georgetown. So we've got Richmond and Penn State in my Final Four so far. UNC UAlbany will be interesting. Quint hit on how UAlbany really has struggled this year in particular against some of the top dogs. UNC hasn't played great against teams that they should beat by 5 or 6 goals, honestly. And one example of that was against John Galloway's Jacksonville team at the start of the year. UNC's got their issues when goal. I'm going to take UNC to win this game, and I think it'll be closer than you think. Syracuse, I have winning over Yale. Big part of that is the dome factor, and Syracuse being a more experienced team that has been there and done that. Cornell, Hopkins, I'll take Cornell. And then Notre Dame, Jacksonville. Give me Notre Dame in that matchup, but big props to John Galloway for the season he has had to date. We'll take Cornell over Notre Dame. I think the Ivy League is going to show pretty well in this tournament. I say that I really have had mostly Ivy League teams losing so far. I had Princeton losing, but I do think Cornell will make it, so the Ivy League will be represented in the Final Four as the 7 seed Cornell makes it. I'll take Syracuse over UNC. We'll get a Syracuse-Cornell game in the Final Four, so that would leave 4, 6, 7, and 8 seeds in the Final Four. I will take Penn State to make the championship game as an 8 seed over Richmond. Actually, I'll take Richmond. I'll flip that. Richmond, a 4 seed in the championship game. I'll take Cornell to beat Syracuse in the Final Four, and Richmond-Cornell, a rematch of the quarters last year, and I'll say Richmond wins it all. No one's talking about them, and I really don't have a great feel this year, but I do think they're being slept on. That's probably the most picked first-round upset, and that's the team that I'm taking to win it all, and honestly, Duke is a more talented team than them, so it's just one of those years where it's very challenging to predict the bracket. I had Princeton out early. Princeton is the number 1 overall seed, but I do think they're drawing a tough matchup potentially by playing Penn State in the second round. Let's go to Tony in Syracuse before we wrap things up this afternoon. What's up, Tony?
Hi, Tim. How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
You going to sneak out and play golf here pretty soon or no?
I don't think I will tonight, but I do want to get out on time just because we've got Paul, our producer, is off to the airport, so we can't have him miss his flight on account of me going overtime like I usually do here.
There you go. I want to switch back if we could just maybe give you an exercise to think about, but regarding the basketball, I'm actually curious as to Folefak was a freshman last year. Is that correct?
Yep.
So I'm curious. I'm curious if you could at some point maybe look at these players in their development from where they started. Like Doty's a 2-year player, and then compare it to, I don't think we have a 2-year player left, but maybe compare him to like a 2-year span with like Starling or somebody like that. But I'd be curious to see what their development was. Like Folefak versus Sadiq White would be sort of easy to do because they're both freshmen. I'm just curious. And I'm only thinking about that because of the coaching staff that we have coming in. And I was just thought maybe that would be something, maybe an angle to maybe look at it. Because I don't think any of our guys developed over the year, to be honest with you, last year or the last 2 years.
Yeah, the one name that I brought up when we've had this conversation in the past, not with you in particular, Tony, but I bring up Nate King sometimes as someone that I feel like did get better as the season progressed, but I don't know if that really was. I mean, I think it's a fair critique to say the coaching staff didn't get a ton of development out of the Syracuse roster last year. And I do think you're onto something. I mean, there's a lot of high ceiling guys on the team, even though they might not be wowing you from a stats perspective to this point. Folefak is someone that could return and get better and better, and they've got high-end athleticism, and they've got great traits in a lot of these players. It's just in the case of like Garway Dual, he hasn't quite put it all together yet. Or a Luke Wilson's a late bloomer at the center position. How much better could he get? So I do think that we're going to see the coaching staff probably develop these guys year over year. Obviously, the big question is how many of these guys can you retain? Because if you struggle this year and you're not flirting with the tournament, then guys are going to be unhappy and probably be looking at switching to another school because they have that potential now with just the free market every year.
Yeah, that's true, but you just don't know what they're, playing for Jerry McNamara could be different, even if, just see how far they get, if that makes sense what I'm saying, in the development stage.
Yeah. All right, Tony, I appreciate you checking in.
All right. Have a great weekend, okay?
You too. Tony in Syracuse. Always appreciate him for hopping on here. And we're going to wrap up the show in this segment. We're going to double up, as we often do in Orange Nation. We'll hand out some shout-outs here before we run. And we bid you adieu for the weekend. Cuse Women's Lacrosse, shout-out to them. We mentioned 7 p.m. start tonight against Loyola. That's on ESPN+. Akir Suarez, shout out to him. He is a package deal with Nathan George once again. He is going to Pittsburgh. Just announced that. Posted some photos yesterday on his Instagram story that he was at Memphis, or Instagram overall that he was at Memphis. and it sounds like he is going to Pittsburgh, so you cannot break up the Akir Soiree, Nathan George package deal. That is staying intact for the third straight year and third different ACC school. Spencer Jones, shout out to him. He's the Yankees' top prospect, one of their top prospects, and he will be debuting tonight in Milwaukee. Anytime we update you on the Yankees, always brought to you by the Wildcat Sports Pub in Camillus. Shout out to our friends there at the Wildcat. And shout out to New York sports in general right now. We got the Knicks and the Sabres tonight. And we mentioned the Yankees when we had JJ on, John Jastrzemski, earlier today on Orange Nation. I mean, the Yankees are the favorites right now in the American League, and the Knicks are the favorites right now in the Eastern Conference. That's pretty awesome to say, and we'll see if they get it done. And to have the Sabres back in the playoffs, they will be playing at 7 p.m. tonight. Knicks at 7 p.m. tonight. And we hope all of you enjoy a lovely sports weekend here in the spring in Central New York. Lacrosse opening weekend. We'll have all those games to react to on Monday and some great playoff games. Good time of the year in the sports calendar with the NHL and NBA playoffs in full swing right now. That's going to wrap up the show this afternoon. Thanks to Paul McCoy, my producer, who's got a flight to catch. And for all of you in the Q Sports Talk chat, thanks for following along. We will talk to you next week on Drive Time.
Jerry McNamara.